Is it really worth the risk when you're building 5 bedrooms, 6 bedrooms, 8 bedrooms, 9 bedrooms tenancies?
Either the woman or the man has to go out of their principal residential place, and then what traditional properties presents, and there's absolutely nothing the traditional ecosystem provides, and that's where co-living comes into picture, wherein they're all furnished.
I always get nervous when someone provides me a rental guarantee because I invest based on fundamentals. I don't invest based on someone's word. If you're rushing or promising instant cash flows or flashing the tax perks, it's not an investment, it's a bet. Co-living properties can generate almost $140,000 in passive income and net of $40,000 in passive income after mortgage repayments, and they sit in an average yield of about 10%. Hello and welcome to another episode of Help Me Buy Property podcast. Today we are talking about co-living properties. Now, co-living properties have been the talk of the town, and we've done a few episodes on the co-living properties. But today's episode is slightly different. It's a curveball episode where we are going to talk about, is co-living property as good as what it seems like, or are we talking about the biggest trap in Australian real estate market? To discuss these episodes, there are two parts of this episode, so please tune in and listen to both of these episodes. To discuss these episodes, I have my co-host today, Mr. Rajan Sharma from Cashflow Real Estate. Rajan, how are you today?
I'm good, thanks. How are you?
I am great, thank you. Rajan, thank you for coming back onto the podcast.
Pleasure.
Now, we are talking about co-living properties. Now, co-living properties has exploded when it comes to Australian popularity in real estate, knowing where the interest rates are and where the market is heading towards, especially in Victoria or Brisbane or Adelaide. And so you're seeing that, there is a mirage of real estate developers or buyers agents, or should I say property spookers who have entered into this space. And it always makes me nervous when there is a billion people, selling a product, making it look like it's the next best thing after white bread. And so my question comes down to, is co-living property really, the next best thing? And is it really better than, the stocks, the gold, and the commercial properties? And before you answer that question, for the viewers and listeners who are tuning in for the first time, explain as to what a co-living property is so that, people can get a bit of an understanding, and then we can get right into the question.
All right, sure. First of all, thanks a lot, Moss, for bringing me back. It's always a pleasure. So let's start with what a co-living property is. Co-living is a property wherein, in literal sense, people are co-living together in any combination. If there are 3 bedroom, 3 bathrooms, there'll be 3 tenants living together and sharing amenities, up till 9 bedroom, 9 bathrooms, wherein you have a community living concept. In co-living, they're also called rooming houses. It can be any combination. I mean, this whole concept, and obviously, like everyone who is listening would be seeing their Facebook news feed filled up with co-living and rooming houses now. But to just let everyone know, your viewers know, that it's not a new concept. It's been running since 50 years or so, with people building multiple rooms and sharing bathrooms or sharing other amenities. Co-living for everyone is different. It depends upon how ethical you are in creating an ecosystem for people who are living there. And as well as, creating as an outcome a huge commercial benefit. From a cash flow real estate perspective, we have quite stringent aspects on how we see co-living, how we build co-living, how we build the rooming houses, which is another word of co-living. We ensure and assure that every single bedroom has a private ensuite, have a private courtyard, so that they're not stuck in four walls and they're not sharing, bathrooms with other community or tenants.
And
right.
so there is a big purpose behind co-living. It's not just about real estate for ROI. There is a massive purpose around building better communities, solving rental crisis, building some of these which are not typically all the boarding houses. The intention is to truly do something better for the communities as well. There is a lot of providers who are working in this space around women violence, women under violence, house issues, single who can't get tenancies because this is the first time they're going out there and getting a tenancy in place. And so they have no history. So there's a lot of good that comes together with this, together with the bad that we're going to talk about.
No, 100%. I mean, there's a huge social impact. I was invited to Ticker and I did mention this aspect, which is quite strong. And again, I'll come down to how strong your own ethics are, where you're building them. But as a concept, co-living definitely provides an opportunity for people who are coming out of domestic violence, the women who are coming out of divorce, or men who are single and are in the middle of divorce, wherein they don't have a place to stay. And then, unfortunately, this situation happens. Either the woman or the man has to go out of their principal residential place, and then what traditional properties present is, they need to figure out how they're going to get the electric connections, the phone connections, the furniture.
Yeah.
And there's absolutely nothing the traditional ecosystem provides. And that's where co-living comes into picture, wherein they're all furnished. All the utility bills are paid off completely. So all they need to do is just pick up their bag and come and just start, start living and rebuilding their life, essentially.
So a lot of good. Yeah. And I get that. But is it really that good? Is it really, better than stock, gold, commercial properties, any other residential properties, any other duplexes out there?
Yeah, I think I'll start from, obviously, you're the property guru and a mentor to a lot of people. And obviously you do a great job in, giving all the knowledge and insights to the community. So I'll not say co-living versus stocks or gold. I'll say property investing versus gold or stock, right? And obviously, why property wins is that you can leverage 80% from the bank, essentially, right? And you only need to invest 20%, and that's how the the relative growth is, right? Essentially, as a overarching fact. Yes, they are good. Coming to your question, excellent. As long as you have all the processes in place, as long as you have a full-time 10-member team actually looking out for locations which are very near to the hospitals or universities or the transportation or offices, so that you're not throwing investors into the dark hole. And we'll talk about it later. A lot I need to convey, get the people, just make the people aware of a lot of kind of ads which come in and hit their mobile.
Yeah.
So it's an excellent investment as long as the location is right, as long as you have done your due diligence, as long as you have taken the due approvals from the council. So there are multiple things. It'll take an hour for me to actually convey how much effort it goes. But ultimately, it's the worst investment if you are building in an estate wherein that co-living provider is building hundreds of those in the same estate. It's only logical that the fulfillment will be a big issue and the property will be empty. As long as you're building in the right locations, you are really going in established areas.
Infield areas, you mean?
Yes. Yeah. So as long as you're really going in the infield areas and even choosing to demolish an existing rundown house so that you don't compromise on the proximity. Yeah. Because ultimately, why it's worse? Because if it's empty, it'll leak money and really be bad. Yeah.
The demand and supply plays a really important part in a lot of these things. When you talk about co-living properties, there's an idea. It makes total sense. This single individual population is, 28 to 30%. It's, one of the fastest growing population sector in Australia. Yeah. And a lot of people use this or abuse this data sets to portray an image that this 30% is universal across the board. And it's not the case, right? You look at, Victoria, you look at areas like Tarneit or Truganina, single denomination is not the, the prime factor of the population growth. Or when you talk about, areas like, some of these key areas where, you're over flooding it with the market,
Yep.
You might think that 30% is, wow, that's great. It's awesome. But it's not really, because, if you're saturating a particular, pocket in a suburb, then, that 30% is irrelevant when the suburb is only a suburb of, 1,000 or 1,500 people, right?
Yep.
And, naturally people tend to use that data for self-serving biases. They would showcase it to LGA versus suburbs, and we'll talk a bit about that. And one of the things that I've noticed quite heavily is, in order to signal that these investments are so great, so awesome, that there is a lot of rental guarantees that are being promoted in the co-living space. And I always get nervous when someone provides me a rental guarantee, because I invest based on fundamentals. I don't invest based on someone's word, who have been existing in literally, over the last 2 years, or they've been existing in the last 2 minutes, right?
Yep.
And so the rental guarantee is, just a pie in the sky or a finger in the air when you talk about some of these new companies, talking about big rental guarantees, because I know that they can disappear, and there's been a lot of validation about these companies coming in and disappearing, like, cockroaches in a rain, right? Where, they'll show up when it's required and they'll disappear when it's not required, right? So how much of this is baiting when it comes to rental guarantee versus real when you talk about, tenancy agreements? And so talk to a bit about that. As to, does your company provide any rental guarantees, or do you offer any of that? And what is your take on, rental guarantees that, that are being flooded out in the market?
Don't get yourself taken on a ride by property spookers, so-called property investment advisors, or buyer's agents who are selling house and land packages or off-the-plan properties or apartments. Get yourself a copy of this book called The Millennial's Guide to Property Investing. This book is not just for millennials. The title suggests, but it's actually the most advanced way of investing in property. This book will relate to your clients, your colleagues, and other business owners. There are so many property spookers out there who have come out of the woodwork over the last 3 to 5 years, and there is so much misinformation out there that I had to write a book about all the F-ups that people can actually avoid in order to be super successful in the property investment journey. Some of these are really easy to identify, but they are so costly to fix once these mistakes are made. So it's a short book, it's easy to read, it has a lot of stories, it has a lot of examples, and it is a true guide for people who wants to do it themselves. My name is Moxin Reza. This is my story, and a lot of you will relate to parts of this story if you're not born in the riches, and if you're trying to build a property portfolio that can last generations and help you improve your lifestyle along the way. So I give you a chance to come out there and have a read. Be kind, stay safe, keep smiling, keep investing, and please do check out the book.
Yeah. So I think we'll start with what's happening, and then we'll talk about what we provide. If the fundamentals of the location are incorrect and they have nothing else to showcase to the potential investor, they'll just put in the rental guarantee as one of the elements so that they can convert the investors. Number one. Number two, the direty of the situation is that, and that's like, I would say for everyone, do ask for the relevant documents from them, because based on what's happening in the market, there are a couple of things I can actually call out, which is there's a little letter with someone's signature saying that it's a rental guarantee. So, all right, so let's start with the rental guarantees. I mean, why people are actually throwing rental guarantees on the face? Because they're big estates, they're building multiple rooming houses. They don't have the location or proximity or fundamentals checked or ticked, so to speak, that the fulfillment will happen. Fulfillment means that it'll be completely filled with tenants. So what they fall on to is, don't worry about it, 60 months rental guarantee, and that to 100%. And the problem statement, and the biggest problem is that those rental guarantee or documents are also not legitimate or valid. The reason is, and I think that's one of the benefits of this podcast, and the viewers who are actually listening to it, do validate, do ask for the relevant documents. I mean, there are people who say that, we have agreements with the hospitals, we have agreement with the universities, and it depends upon you, right? I mean, if you just hear it and sign up, right, you are really heading for a big failure.
Yeah. So if you can take a pause there, when you say these documents are not genuine or not valid, I mean, they are valid, right? But that's why these people are signing it, right? It's the authenticity and the credibility of these documents, what like typically I would question. That of course the company exists, and yes, you are signing up with the company, and the company is taking up the risk of providing you that rental guarantee, right? I'll use this as an example. You would see a lot of builders who would build up brand new houses and get a lease back done for 8% rental yield. And what the builder is doing, and everyone knows this, that they'll jack up the price.
Yeah.
They'll inflate the price by say 10 or 20%, and they'll roll it up into the price of the property, and they'll offer an 8% rental guarantee for 2 years, 3 years while that house is used as a demo house, or for them to basically showcase the piece of work, right?
Yeah.
And so it's a genuine guarantee. There's nothing wrong with that. The builder could be a very established builder, and they're doing that.
Yep.
What you're doing is you're basically capping your risk for the first 1 to 2 years. And that, this is not the rent that you're going to get when you finish off this in 2 years' time. And, and you might, get a lower rental. And, sometimes I've heard or I've seen that these rentals drop from 8% yield to like 4% yield or 3% yield, right?
Yep.
But that's the risk that you are ready to accept, provided that the builder is legitimate and does not go down the rabbit hole of, disappearing or collapsing, right?
Yep.
My question here is slightly different. My question is that, okay, I understand all of that. And yes, the credibility is there. And yes, there is a hospital next to the state. Should people consider it? Like, is it really worth the risk when you're building 5 bedrooms, 6 bedrooms, 8 bedrooms, 9 bedrooms tenancies? Is it worth the risk? Because the companies are existing literally for 2 minutes. They've been set up 6 months ago, 8 months ago, 12 months ago. They were non-existent before that.
Yeah.
And so how good is the genuineness of this rental guarantee when you know that this company can turn off their business or their rental business and disappear? B, there's a massive concentration risk of, okay, you have a hospital in the area and you're building that hospital there, or that hospital is there and you're building a house there.
Yep.
And so, yes, naturally, you may have, let's say for the argument's sake, you may have an agreement in place with the hospital, but the hospital might only need 50 people and you're building 500 of them. Right?
Yep.
And so I don't know how many are you building in that particular state, right?
Yep.
And 3, coming back to hospital and using their name and abusing their name of hospitals, areas, or industrialists, etc. How good are they, right? Who are they? Have you called them out? Have you seen those agreements? And, whether these agreements are genuine in nature. Is hospital really giving you a free hand of, hey, you build in 1,000 rooms and I'm going to rent out 1,000 rooms, right? And that's where really my gist of the question is, that when you talk about real tenancy agreements versus rental guarantees, how do you differentiate? Like, what is the gist of, these promotions that are coming through?
Yeah, see, the reason, and I understand, I mean, it can be legitimate and, someone would have signed it. The issue and why I'm actually going the path, which is going the path of it being illegitimate, because we have first-hand experience. So because of the influx of so much advertisement happening and people who already were working with us to build a co-living property for them, they got lured. And nothing wrong with that, because you get ads saying 100% rental guarantee. Yeah. But the issue is that when we asked them to verify and validate it, and we were like, okay, that's fine. I mean, if someone is giving you 100% rental guarantee, great. Just ask certain questions. May it be the legitimacy of the agreement, ask for the hospital agreement, which has happened, and literally, Moss, they ran away. And then that potential client or the client was really, really thanking us that, we have saved them. So, I mean, what I want to call out is that even if you have an agreement with the hospital, you can't actually just influx that area with no other infrastructure supporting. You can't actually build 10, 15, 50 of rooming houses when your own rooming houses will be competing with the other rooming houses. The biggest differentiating factor for us is that we have this unknown rule. Mandatorily, we don't build more than 2 co-living properties, for example, in a single suburb. And the distance should be 10 kilometers away, for example. Even if you are building more, it has to be a really established area, right? So, which people are not paying heed to it.
Yeah.
One thing I just want to call out, and I was really surprised, was that there was this single company with multiple bill prices, and then had lot 210, lot 112, and whatnot. So here we are taking care of not more than 2 in a suburb, and it has to be really in an established area and going through the pain of demolishing it so that it's really in field. And on the other side, you see that they're not even caring about, that influx and what's going to happen next, right? They're exactly doing it to co-living. I'll still say ethics that, what will happen to the client when the property is built. So please be aware, and I'm calling it out. If someone is pushing the rental guarantee, it really means they have nothing else at all nothing else at all for in regards to the fundamentals, right? And what you need to take care of, when you talk about a co-living property, you cannot afford to have the property empty.
Sure. And so what's this with the cap of 60 months? Like, I've seen this, being floated around quite a bit.
Yeah.
What's this magical 60 months cap? Yeah. Like, why 60 months if you truly believe that the demand is there and the hospital is there and the hospital has a universal agreement in place with you and you are so sure that you'll fill the rooms? Why 60 months? It almost feels like a builder's guarantee where the builder, jacks up the price, takes it for 3 years or 36 months. And then say, oh, look, after 3 years, I don't really need this demo house. And so you can go out there and rent it by yourself. And so, of course, the expectation is that the rent yield goes from 8% to 3%. Is that something that's playing up here as well?
100%. And I think do listen to Moz when he said 60 months, because that's a question we asked that client to ask that co-living provider, that why 60 months? Why not in perpetuity? Why not for life? If you're so confident and you have the hospital agreements and whatnots. What it drills down, Moss, is definitely I'll go towards, I'll delve towards that logic of them inflating it just to mitigate their risk and then cover that 100% rental guarantee. That's one.
Yeah.
Secondly, please rely on logics and common sense that if there are a lot of lots anyone is selling in very late states, it means that after 5 years, it will be a disaster. And again, I mean, if the agreements are not legitimate, the hospital agreements are not in place, it might be a disaster right after your property is built. Yeah. But after 5 years, it's a guaranteed disaster because you're building like 500 rooms in one estate.
Yeah,
it's only logical that it will not be filled and a lot of rooms will be empty.
And you can see examples of like Thornhill, Park in Victoria, for example, where naturally when you're building normal houses with tenancies in place, let's say you're building 100 of them in a state, and those are 100 tenancies that are at risk, right? When you're building 100 houses or when you're selling 100 lots with 100 houses with 5 bedroom, 5 bathroom, technically you have 500 leases that you have to fill, right? Yep. And so you're at 5 times the risk. And so, of course, the demand needs to be there versus supply. And so, coming back to my original point that, yes, rental guarantees are great. Yes, it signals, strength. But then if you really want to signal the strength, then the rental guarantee or the cash flow guarantee needs to be in perpetuity. It cannot be 60 months. It cannot be 2 years, 3 years, 5 years, right? It has to be in perpetuity because you believe in the demand so much that, that guarantee needs to be there. And so my question to you is, do you offer any of these? Like, do you talk about cash flow guarantees or rental guarantees, when you are jumping into your ecosystem?
Yeah. So we don't. But we have an element of cash flow guarantee, which is not a rental guarantee at all. To mitigate our risks, we do not inflate the cost of the build. We do not bring in dodgy agreements and say, there's a hospital or a university and, there's an agreement signed. Our cash flow guarantee is quite simple, which is will insure and assure and in perpetuity, right, for life. Okay. That will not let you go below 75% of your cash flow. Let's say, take an example of 9 bedrooms. So if, let's say, at any given point in time, there is less than 7 rooms filled, we'll fill up or top up that gap. But what's going to happen next is that once we get the 9 tenants, we'll just recoup it, right? And any sane, logical business who want to survive, as well as do good for the community and not throw them in the dark hole, will do that, right? So, and that's why, I love that comment, right? If you are giving a rental guarantee for 60 months, give it for lifelong. We are giving it for lifelong.
Yeah.
And we explain it to the clients that, like how we are managing our risks. Yeah. And there's no element of inflating it by 100K so that our risk is sorted. But you need to remember you're paying 100K extra, for example, right? So.
And so my next question is, which is a segue to the original discussion that we were having, is if you are that sure about the leases or the rental guarantees, just sign the head lease, right?
Yeah.
Just sign the head lease, taking up the risk. What is this, the messier way of, deeds of agreements or expressions of agreement or...
See, ultimately, the core of it is that it has to be an agreement, a proper agreement, a legal agreement from the property management company who will be taking up the property, right? It all goes down to that. A lot of head leases were signed for 5 years, 5 years, and 5 years, and the property is empty.
Yeah.
Right. So what you need to look out for is there a legitimate property management company? Do research about that property management company on how many co-living houses they are leasing right now, so that experience is there as one of the things. And then you can actually pick it up and do get legal advice of the legitimacy of that agreement they're actually sending. When you talk about deed of agreement, the direct, and when we asked our client to actually go to the provider and get that deed of agreement, it was just a little letter in a big PDF with sign saying that we are guaranteeing this amount and signed by a company, right? And I don't want to go into the details, but that company also has a past of going into bankruptcy. So be very, very aware of who you're dealing with and how much experience they have. I think one of the questions I always ask, and we're really proud that we'll be, I think in September or October, we'll be completing our 100 builds, right?
Amazing. So
you need to really ask that question, that how many co-living houses you have built.
Yeah.
Right. And I can almost guarantee that, you don't know what guarantees, or guarantee that the probability of them having the number 0 is very, very high.
Yeah.
Right. And if they say, yes, we have built only 30-10, do ask for the addresses, do ask for, going there, and do ask that whether this rental guarantee you're giving has been kicked off for anyone.
So if we take a step back and talk to my original question, difference between a formal lease versus a head of agreement. You can take a guarantee, you can take a head lease at the top, but you can take that head lease without taking any accountability of the property at all, right?
Yep.
And so I'm talking about formal leases where you can test it out in the court of law. You can go to VCAT and CAT and get that, company, or, technically a head lease means that they are the lessor, right? They are the people who would pay you the rent, right? Whatever they do with the property is up to them, right?
Yeah.
Versus the deed of agreement, which does not take you to the court of law, and it goes to potentially be a civil case where, you're basically reaching out to a company and taking them to a civil court of law, not so much the VCAT, where you are asking them to, hey, you have signed up an agreement with me and you need to pay this agreement to me. Like, what are the big differences, and what should people, why should people force more towards the head leases and the formal leases? Yeah, with them taking accountability of the lease, taking the payment away versus a deed of agreement.
Yeah, head of lease is always better in that regard, as long as the head of lease contains the legalities. It doesn't contain that if you're not able to get the potential tenants, then go away and then go for another one and it'll be over. A head lease has to be signed by a legitimate, and I'm talking in the co-living language, but rooming house provider, right? So basically the property is taken over by that rooming house provider. And in our case, it's Help Me Rent. And we provide those head of leases to our clients. All right, Moz, that's a great question. Let's start with a formal lease or head lease. You should always rely on that. Because if you're getting a head lease or a formal lease, it will be definitely from a property manager. Do check that as well. In our case, they're called rooming house providers. The power of a head lease or a formal lease is that you can actually take the company to VCAT. And as long as it's legitimate and has all the bells and whistles from a legality point of view. In the head leases and formal leases, there is a property management company and the director of that property management company who will be liable and responsible. So that can be a good peace of mind for you. When you talk about deed of agreement, it's actually almost 100% with a company, and that company can tomorrow disappear and can take away all the rental guarantees which they actually wrote in a single piece of paper, essentially. So do not rely on the deed of agreements.
Yeah. And look, I truly believe that, if you think that deed of agreement protects you like a lease, then you are already lost, right? It's a legal, it's a legal trap dressed as a bait, right?
Yep.
Basically, that's what it is. And so a lot of the times people don't understand what you need to always assure is it's not just about the lease, but it's also about the accountability and the responsibility. Because I've seen a lot of head leases where, you would sign a head lease, but in the fine print, it says, oh, if the tenant doesn't come in, then we are not liable to pay any rent, right?
Yeah.
So you need to be very careful about those as well. But you need to be also careful about the deed of agreement. Deed of agreement is just the paper written where it takes you down the civil court and not so much exposes you to the cats and everything else. So it's very interesting. So one of the last questions that I do have is, you see a lot of co-living providers, especially pressured with agencies and emotional language and, oh, this is the best deal in town and this would disappear. I truly believe that if you're rushing or promising instant cash flows or flashing the tax perks, it's not an investment, it's a bait, right?
Yep.
So what are some of these red flags when it comes to co-living that as soon as you hear them, you should run for your life?
Yeah, see, my heart actually bleeds and I'm getting a bit emotional here, but I think there's a thing called repeat offenders. So when you see a lot of people coming from, and I mean, they were the kings pivoting directly into co-living and they're exactly doing the same. I think yesterday only, again, the biggest red flag, 170K, right, for a co-living property in the middle of nowhere. We do get around 330 to 340 rental in Metro. But I mean, inflating the rental to around 380, 390 with no logic behind it, just to make it attractive and put it there so that like a bait, they can get more investors. That's number one red flag. Please ask them how I'll be able to get 170K. And these are the same guys who did it for high physical support. You're going to get 200K and 250K when the ground reality was very, very different.
But it's more about the responsibility of the investor as well, right?
100%.
You need to go out there and see what a 1-bedroom or a 2-bedroom house rents for, right?
Yes.
Some of these locations, when you talk about, Bonshire or these areas where a 3-bedroom, 1-bathroom house can rent for 350, why would someone pay, 350 per week for a single bedroom? Like it's logically insane, right? Yeah. As a person who's looking for something for rent, if I can get a 2-bedroom, 1-bathroom or a 3-bedroom, 1-bathroom house for the same rent as what you are showcasing for a 1-bedroom, 1-bathroom, no matter how good and nice the house is, I don't give a as to, how good or nice the house is, right? Because, ultimately it comes down to money for me, right? You're not talking about the northern beaches of Sydney. You're not talking about the high-end market of Toorak and Melbourne, right? Yeah. You're talking about still the low socioeconomic areas of Victoria or Adelaide or Queensland. And so you need to be very responsible about what sort of rents can you demand in these areas as well, right?
Yeah. I mean, funny enough, they have this graphic saying that, one is paying 420, one is paying 410, one tenant is paying 380. And I'm just thinking that with so much experience with co-living, the max we have, and I'm calling it out, we've reached 340 or 395 for a couple. Yeah. I don't know how these numbers are coming from, what logic and experience is there. So it's just that marketing fluff. Yeah. Just pushing the clients or the investors into the dark hole. That's one. Secondly, when you talk about Bonshire, right? The funniest part is that in their presentation, they do not talk about the population of the suburb, which is 990. They talk about how big, Ballarat is. When they are presenting that suburb, which is Bonshire, they talk about the overall population of that whole regional area, which is Ballarat, and do not talk about the suburb. And what matters for the fulfillment or tenancy for any co-living property is how big is the population of that suburb and what sort of infrastructure is supporting it. Yeah. There was a little argument that, it's near to the Ballarat CBD, but not so much when you're building 500 rooms next to each other. Your 300, 370, it'll evaporate. It'll go to like even 150, 120 because there's such a big influx.
How different are these products? And can you actually combine the two returns together?
No, it can be either or. I'll give you an example from a perspective of a 9-bedroom, 9-bathroom, right? From a compliance perspective, you have to have one disability ensuite, where you have access and that room is built for if someone is disabled, they can come. If you want to register that house as a rooming house with disability access. So either you'll be compromising on the number of rooms or inflating and super inflating the price of the build. So if you talk about even lower products, right? Like, literally we can build, and I'll not reveal the prices, but we can build a 3-bedroom, 3-bathroom or a 4-bedroom, 4-bathroom at a really, really, really low cost. But if you want to go for a hybrid approach, obviously the build size will increase and you need to have all the disability checks.
Even if you build the hybrid, does it work? Like, can you...
It'll not, right? For the biggest pain in the idea as well. So if you have an idea, you're always stuck because it's always either or. Either you house tenants who are rooming house tenants, you'll be stuck in the waiting game because your provider will tell you on face that, Moss, if you now decide to put, any tenant in your property, right, then we cannot show it to the potential disabled participants.
Sure.
And then that option is almost gone.
Yeah.
So either you wait or either you do this.
Yeah.
Right.
And
we've seen, just to complete, we have seen people who are waiting, they're waiting for years.
Yes. Yeah.
Right. And then if you go to the, the co-living way, then why not build a custom ground up co-living at pretty much like, I'll not say 1/3, but 2/3 the cost.
Yeah.
Right.
But unfortunately, you being in this industry for over 2 decades now, or almost 2 decades now, you see a lot of these fluff coming around, and it's always very difficult to identify the good versus bad. And sometimes, the intention is good, but the implementation is bad. When you talk about co-living, the general impact that this makes in the community, in the open population, is amazing.
Yep.
It's the implementation. It's, the greedy investors, chasing ROIs and, trying to milk the industry is what drives, and makes everyone lose instead of, few winners, instead of everyone winning, right? So I think it's very, very important to call that out.
Yeah, I'll just take away from the greedy investors. So let's
bring this together.
The greedy companies, who are actually building up these fluff and marketing fluffs and presenting it, I would say naive investors who don't know what's really happening, and it looks too, luring to grab it and grab the opportunity without sussing out or validating, what's really happening. And just I'll take 30 seconds to actually call out that for everyone who is listening to it, we've practically observed a 5-bedroom, 5-bathroom house, proper SDA built and approved, and that client is stuck with, I think, around $300 or $600 for a fortnight or something, because they have people who are there as a temporary arrangement, we call it MTA, in anticipation to get an SDA, and obviously it's huge influx. So the psyche of that investor is that he can't go and house 5 tenants there as a co-living because he's in that waiting game. And that's a real world. That's a reality, right?
Yeah. Look, for viewers and listeners, we are going to take a pause here. We're going to come back for the second episode. Rajan, thank you for coming out today.
Pleasure.
Where can people find you, Raj?
Yeah, I mean, you can definitely go to our website, which is cashflowrealestate.com.au. You can go to our socials. We have Cashflow Real Estate Facebook page, wherein we, always have a lot of properties which are getting built. Almost every day you will find a property getting tenanted or built or slab poured in. So you can, reach out in the contact form on that page. And you can email at info@cashflowrealestate.com.au as well.
Thank you very much for viewers and listeners. This ends the part 1 and part 2. We are going to talk about private investors. We are going to talk about council approvals. We are going to talk about the paperwork and the DA side of things and what happens in that space. We are also going to talk about how enforceable some of these contracts are, and the most important thing, the due diligence checklist that is required for you to ensure that any product that you build when it comes to co-living, gets a tick not only from a compliance perspective, but also from a tenancy perspective. Thank you for listening to us today. Take care, stay safe, keep smiling, keep investing. This is Raj and Moss checking out. Adios.
Thank you.